Week 7's here in the NFL, and that means it's time to dig into the toughest start and sit decisions you've got at every single position. This week's a doozy, right? We've got some great teams on bye. We got the Rams, who are the worst record team on bye because the 5-1 Vikings, the 5-1 Eagles, and the 6-0 Bills are also on a bye. That means tons of fantasy relevant players sitting on your bench. And that means we got some flex spots to fill, so we should go position by position as we always do on the Stochastic Fantasy Football channel. What's up, guys? My name is Matt Savoca. You can follow me at Draftaholic, and you could do us a huge favor on the Stochastic Fantasy Football channel if you like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell as well. Does us a huge favor, and you guys got to check out our brand new sponsor, BetMGM. They have an unbelievable no-brainer deal to get into. I'll show you guys how to do that in just a minute, but we've got too much to dig into to waste any more time. Let's dig into the action for week 7. Let's start at the running back position. You're not benching AJ Dillon just yet, guys. I'm more concerned about Aaron Jones, to be completely honest. Dillon is creeping up in terms of all the opportunity types we think that Aaron Jones should get. Dillon is getting more and more of that. He's top 20 in carries, top 18 in targets. He's an RB2 on a mediocre squad, and he's RB22 in expected fantasy points as well. So I see RB1 upside. I see RB2 opportunity value right now. 18 routes in week 6. That's an important part here. Only 7 less routes than Aaron Jones. More targets than Aaron Jones last week. AJ Dillon had a season high in targets this week. At least 50 total yards in 3 of 5 games for AJ Dillon as well, so I think the touchdowns will come, especially against a Washington team. I know they're on the road, but Washington was 7th worst as a defense against opposing offenses in adjusted fantasy points allowed this season. They're a sieve, is really what I'm trying to say here. I think AJ Dillon has a more secure role right now than Aaron Jones in a mediocre Green Bay offense. I'm still starting AJ Dillon as a decent RB2 or flex. Hey guys, I know this time of year, it doesn't feel like every single fantasy football team you have is destined for a championship, but if you want to make a championship move right now, check out BetMGM and click the link in the video description below, because right now they have an incredible offer that is truly a no-brainer bet. When you're a new customer over there and you make a $10 money line bet, any team, any sport, any favorite, any underdog, and a team scores a goal in the NHL. Literally just a team scores a goal. You win $200 in free bets. Yeah, that's right. You're turning $10 into $200 that easily. You just make a money line bet, and then a team in the NHL scores a goal. Click the link in the video description below, and don't be afraid to message me at Draftaholic if you need any help getting it started. I also think you still roll with Travis Etienne. I know he's let us down. 0 touchdowns this season. That's tough, especially when you see that 75-yard run against Indianapolis get pulled back by penalty, and then later in the game, JaMychal Hasty takes a 3rd-and-1 run to the house. Come on. It's so annoying, but 7 targets the last 2 weeks for Etienne. That's huge. 10-plus carries in his last 2 and 3 of his last 4, I should say, and double-digit fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games as well. That's what I like to see. I know the New York Giants defense is tougher than we expected, but we're still looking at a league average defense in schedule-adjusted fantasy points allowed to both the running back position specifically and to opposing offenses in general. The Giants playing better than anyone really thought, but they're not a stay-away defense at this point. I still think Etienne trending better than James Robinson. Certainly would rather start Etienne over Robinson, but I think it's a little bit fluky the way we haven't seen production from Etienne so far this year. Some other options, I'm starting with confidence at the running back position. Definitely still going with Joe Mixon. I know it's been a tough down year, and while other Cincinnati Bengals take turns overperforming their expectations, it seems like Mixon keeps underperforming his. I think the value will come later in the season. Tony Pollard against a bad Detroit defense is definitely a player I'm starting, and I might even start Zeke if I have to. And Kenneth Drake, if you spent that fab budget for him, especially if Dobbins doesn't play, that surgically repaired knee tightened up on him, I think Drake is a fine RB2 or flex spot against the Cleveland Browns. And let's keep it in that same game. I don't want to play Kareem Hunt against the Baltimore Ravens. There's some floor for Kareem Hunt, but not as much floor as you would think. And he's only had 1 ceiling game this year. That was week 1. Never more than 4 targets in a game for Hunt this year. Has only topped 70 yards total once in a game. And he needs touchdowns to succeed at this point because the targets aren't there. And, the efficiency has been so, at least this season. The snap share dwindling, don't like to see that. And the Baltimore defense improving, don't like to see that. They're up to 13th in defensive DVOA over the last 3 weeks. There's always a chance for Hunt, right? Because this team plays so conservatively, but ultimately I think Chubb is the significantly better back right now, and Baltimore is a defense I don't really want to mess with if I don't have to. Other backs that I'm shying away from, or at least I have ranked lower than consensus, I don't really want to start Raheem Mostert or Chase Edmonds for that matter against the Pittsburgh Steelers, whose defense continues to get healthier and continues to improve as a whole. Antonio Gibson continues to fall out of favor, and Green Bay's defense is the only thing that's even coming close to working right now, and Tyler Algier in an Atlanta offense that loves to run is still too tough to trust. I would rather keep it on the bench as well this week. Next, let's talk wide receiver, and I'm starting Michael Gallup of the Dallas Cowboys against a bad Detroit Lions defense. I mean, maybe they figured things out during the bye week, but I'm not so sure. And you're talking about a Dallas team that's getting way healthier at the right time. They get Dak Prescott back this week, and they're going to need all the wins they can get in an NFC East that is suddenly talented, and it's going to be a battle for first place with the Eagles and the Giants really overperforming expectations. And one thing I love to see about Gallup is the opportunities are really starting to improve. 7 targets, 98 air yards in week 6 against the Eagles. It only turned into 2 receptions for 18 yards, but we've got those opportunity value metrics to see that a boom week is possible for Gallup. And I think you're going to see some 5-6 target weeks. Sure, CeeDee Lamb is going to get his, but ultimately, I think Gallup can have some huge weeks down the stretch, especially with Gallup back in the saddle for the Cowboys. And I'm also not quite ready to hit the panic button with Courtland Sutton either, guys. It doesn't feel great to start him. I know the Jets are playing pretty well, and Russ is playing anything but well in Denver, and now he's injured, so says Coach Nathaniel Hackett. Hackett's on the hot seat already. I don't know what else to say. Denver has underperformed so poorly to begin this season that I think that Nathaniel Hackett needs to be reconsidered by the Denver front office immediately. And the Jets, it's basically a pick-up game right now in Vegas because the Jets are playing so well, but Sutton is just too good of a player to stay stagnant from a fantasy perspective with Russell Wilson for too long. Sutton is 9th in receiving yards right now, 6th in red zone targets, wide receiver 16 in expected fantasy points per game. So the opportunities absolutely there for Courtland Sutton. This is not a benchable player, especially when we have so many fantasy relevant players on bye. The Jets are 11th, so league average in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receiver. It's not a stay away matchup for me, so I'm going with Courtland Sutton. Yeah, and after that, if it goes really poorly, then we can start to wave the red flag. Other notable wide receivers that I feel extra confident about, how about Chase Claypool and George Pickens on top of Deontay Johnson? I think Miami's defense is not good. They're getting a little bit healthier in the secondary, but they're still bottom 3 in pass DVOA, according to Football Outsiders. Wan'Dale Robinson came back from injury, and I think he's an okay play against a Jacksonville defense that is sliding back towards league average. And Tyquan Thornton against the Chicago Bears, low total game, but a 6'2", 220-pound speedster might just be what New England and Bailey Zappi needs to get going. And then 2 players who performed pretty well last week that I would go right back to the well. Mecole Hardman against the San Francisco 49ers. And in that same game, Brandon Ayuk is a start this week. The opportunity value looks good for him in Kansas City, down to 31st in Football Outsiders pass DVOA. Now we'll head to the tight end position, where it's an excellent week if you're looking to stream a tight end option. Now, there's still streaming tight ends, right? It doesn't mean that they're all going to score excellently in fantasy football. In fact, some of them will underperform. But ultimately, we've got some great options, some great matchups, and some clear paths to success, which is more than we can say most weeks. My favorite is probably Pat Freiermuth right now, coming back from injury, going against the Miami Dolphins. And we already talked about the Dolphins struggling as a pass defense. He's 7th in targets per route run right now among the tight end position, and 5th in air yard share. That's pretty solid for this second-year player. He's also getting accurate throws from both Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett, 8th in on-target rate at his entire position, and 8th in yards per route run. I think that's a really solid tight end 1 in the making. If he can stay healthy, Pat Freiermuth is going to be a good little player, especially in this solid matchup against Miami. He's my favorite of the streaming tight ends. As I mentioned, there are a lot of other players you could choose from, though. Robert Tonyan might be available as a streaming option. He goes against a Washington defense that is bottom 6 against tight ends this year. Hunter Henry goes against the Chicago Bears, who are anything but scary against tight ends, and he had a 31-yard score last week. And how about Daniel Bellinger, who is getting more opportunity than anyone really expected. 5 targets last week for the Giants. He goes against a Jaguars defense that is only so-so against the pass. On the flip side, I don't want to start Tyler Conklin at all against the Denver Broncos. The Jets are running very hot right now, and I mean that literally. They're running very well. They're not passing very well. In fact, you might say they're winning despite poor QB play. We'll get into that in a minute. Conklin has also been less involved, and it's coincided with the fact that the running game has been so efficient, especially Breece Hall. Conklin's down to tight end 15 in expected fantasy points per game, and here's the worst part. He's only had 1 red zone target all year. That means the touchdown upside is essentially non-existent. Now, can any player on the field in an NFL game theoretically catch a touchdown? Sure, but there is really very little evidence at this point to say that Tyler Conklin has high touchdown probability here. Denver has been one of the toughest pass defenses in the NFL, top 5 in pass yards allowed per game, and in schedule-adjusted fantasy points allowed. That means it's tougher for opposing offenses to pass on them, and I think the Jets are winning despite poor pass play from Zach Wilson. Their running game is what's propelling them forward right now. And finally, we'll go to the quarterback position, and I'm going right back to the player that I suggested right in this spot in last week's video, Jimmy Garoppolo, going against the Kansas City Chiefs, who over the last 3 weeks are bottom 3 in Football Outsiders pass DVOA, 26th in schedule-adjusted fantasy points allowed this season. That means they're one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL right now, and we know their offense can usually keep pace, but let's not pretend that they really couldn't stop Josh Allen at the end of that game. I know that Bills-Chiefs game didn't result in the shootout we all expected, but they still ultimately lost that game defensively. And right now, Jimmy Garoppolo, quietly, 7th best in adjusted yards per attempt in the NFL, up to top 20 in fantasy points per game, despite this team not really playing at a fast pace or passing very much at all. He's 4th in red zone completion rate. He's got some great targets, obviously. Kittle, Samuel, and Ayuk all coming through. Right now, Jimmy Garoppolo in a good matchup yet again. I think he might be an every week QB 1-2 type of starter. Can't believe I'm saying. And some others that I have higher than consensus right now. Ryan Tannehill against Indianapolis. Indy may have won that game against Jacksonville, but their defense looks like a weak link right now, and I think Ryan Tannehill has a chance here. Obviously, Derrick Henry is in a good spot as well. Taylor Heineke might actually be more aggressive and more rush heavy than Carson Wentz in Green Bay. It might not be pretty, but it might be a fantasy QB2 week as well. And then speaking of QB2 weeks, the rushing floor and honestly ceiling of Marcus Mariota, if he's on a waiver wire still, go get him. It makes total sense to start him against the Bengals in what could be a sneaky shootout this week. I already mentioned one Jets player in this video, but I gotta mention Zach Wilson. Keep him on your bench against the Broncos here. The Denver defense is the only thing that's working. I'm not starting Justin Fields either, the Chicago Bears, but I want to highlight, or maybe I should say low light, Zach Wilson, who on a team that's 3rd in pace of play and 6th in pass plays per game, he's 36th in passing TDs, less than 200 yards per game, throwing deep barely twice a game, 20th in adjusted yards per attempt. On a per game or a per pass efficiency basis, Wilson looks well below average. I would say the team is winning in spite of Zach Wilson right now. Going against a Denver team that is really tough against the pass, want no part of it. And by the way, while we're at it, don't start either of Trubisky or Pickett. We can start their receiving options without having high hopes for either of those players right now. Even though Miami's pass defense is mediocre at best, in fact, probably bad, I don't want anything to do with that QB situation in Pittsburgh right now. That's it, guys. We just went position by position, broke down some of the toughest start and sit decisions you've got this week. And if you've got another tough decision that you want us to break down, make sure to leave comment below. Let us know what you're dealing with, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. You guys know what to do. And if you want to follow me, Matt Savoca, on Twitter, you can find me there at Draftaholic as well. Click the link in the video description below to take advantage of that awesome offer from BetMGM, and let's win some fantasy football games in Week 7. Until next time, I'm Matt Savoca from Stochastic Fantasy Football. See you guys later.